This is William K. Murtaugh, Mert Witness 1, and today we are going to discuss backpedal. Now, today I came across a statement or article by Timothy Charles Homseth on the internet. And he made it in one sentence. He basically threw out everything he has claimed and said about the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force since this whole business started. Now, he didn't say there was no Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. He simply quit using the term, and he simply quit using the graphic that's always been used when discussing things that have to do with the Pentagon Task Force. And it doesn't matter if I get the words out of order because the damn thing doesn't exist anyway. But this is the important part. In the very first sentence, he has indicated that there has never been any role by E-Clause in any effort to get Field McConnell out of prison. States it quite clearly. E-Clause is not a legal representative of Field McConnell. E-Clause is not engaged in the efforts to get Field McConnell freed from prison. It's being done by a unnamed high security task force. Now, what's interesting about this is people have been arguing for a long time that Kirk Pendergrass and E-Clause have no business being involved with Field McConnell. That E-Clause does not have a legal standing to represent Field McConnell, and that whatever strategy E-Clause has employed in the efforts to A, keep Field McConnell from going to jail in the first place, and B, get Field McConnell out of jail, have failed. Timothy Homseth and those around Field McConnell are having a dose of reality. Timothy Homseth and those around Field McConnell realize that E-Clause is not going to be able to do anything to mitigate the damage that Timothy Homseth has done to Field McConnell by getting him involved in this personal vendetta with Kim Bocasio. Now, this goes back to the significant events that happened when Field McConnell came out of solitary confinement and was able to get his phone privileges back. It is likely that Field McConnell agreed that in return for his phone privileges, that A, he would not mention Kim Bocasio at all, make any inference that anybody he is talking about is Kim Bocasio, and B, he would quit making threats, calling for people's executions, and so on and so forth. He's entitled to lie about who he is. He's entitled to lie about what the Children's Crusade is. He's entitled to lie about everything. But you cannot threaten people. Now, I would suggest that the reason that all this is done is that people are beginning to understand that there is a federal investigation underway into the federal agency that everyone in this group has espoused to exist, and that is this pedophile task force. You know, some of them are probably sought out bar certified lawyers, and the bar certified lawyers told them, yeah, you guys have violated the law because you're not supposed to be saying that the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force is part of the United States government. It's a felony. And so the backpedal has started. Tim Homseth was the first. Now, it'll be curious to see how Kirk Pendergrass handles this. He's probably scratching his head on the phone with Chris Hallett, trying to figure out how they're going to get out of this situation. And the problem is they can't. All you had to do is say once that you're a member or affiliated with the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, and you were done. There's no going back. You can't backpedal your way out of it because you've already committed the fraud. You have received funds by declaring that you are an agent, employee, or officer of the United States government and an agency affiliated with the United States government. It's not like you go out and rob a bank, change your mind, and go and give the money back. You've already robbed the bank. Once you rob the bank, you've committed a crime. There's no backpedal. And it's the same with the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. You robbed the bank. You're going to have to account for your actions by doing that. Now, one logical way of mitigating the damage here is to come out and declare that the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force does not exist. Tim Homseth did this in a rather interesting way. He dropped two words. Pentagon Pedophile. Now it's just a task force. It's a super secret, high-level government agency. Unnamed. Its mission, questionable at the very least. Because now, pedophiles are out of the equation. Others could argue all this political conspiracy theory gibberish, but the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force died on December 18, 2019. And the executioner was Timothy Charles Homseth. Now, it's rather interesting. This is the first time I've seen Homseth take an approach like this. In the past, such as with Robert David Steele and his judicial panel that he was supposed to be part of, Timothy Charles Homseth bragged it up. Said it's an international agency. It is fighting pedophiles, all this other stuff. Steele allegedly got Tim Homseth, the Virginia lawyer that represented him in the lawsuit against me and Kim Pacasio. When that lawsuit was thrown out for lack of jurisdiction, Tim Homseth quit mentioning Robert David Steele or this organization. It's completely forgotten. I can't even remember the name of the damn thing. But I don't recall seeing any mention of Steele since the day the lawsuit was thrown out. It's as if Steele never existed. And then suddenly, like magic, here's Phil McConnell. and the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force came out of nowhere, straight out of somebody's imagination. And they bragged it up, and bragged it up again, until people came aware of the fact that they were violating the law, that they were misleading people, that they were misrepresenting who they were in order to garner funds through donation to their cause. And it took until today for that to sink in, because more than likely preliminary investigation steps were taken, usually through a letter with a government letterhead wanting information on the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, or perhaps an investigator started contacting people to find out just what the hell is going on. And people started to get nervous. Maybe somebody called a lawyer and said, "Can I get into trouble for this?" And the lawyer said, "Yep." He said, if you have done this, you're in deep doo-doo. And people are running away like rats, running away from a cat. They're saying, uh-oh. And publicly, one at a time, people are going to start saying, "I support the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, but I'm not a member of it. I have nothing to do with it. That's their gig. They're the ones that are on the board. I'm part of the Children's Crusade." Now, this is where the problems with these people have not gone away. Because the Children's Crusade is a fraud. Children's Crusade is also being investigated by the Federal Trade Commission. Because Children's Crusade has not saved one child. Children's Crusade is a way to garner revenue, to seek donations. Phil McConnell has used both the Children's Crusade and the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, now just the task force, to garner funds. And he doesn't use these on any Children's Crusade. He uses them to buy cars, to go on trips to the United Kingdom, to go on trips to functions down in Texas or wherever. The Children's Crusade has not saved one child. The Children's Crusade has not prevented anything. Children's Crusade came up with a bulletin that, under the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, Marines were supposed to have saved 2,100 children from tunnels in the state of California. This proof of this is yet to be made public. Tim Homseth, who declared himself the media spokesperson for this organization, and who was third in line to President of the United States, was supposed to have had the responsibility to make this rescue public. Now, this brings up another point having to do with Homseth's declaration today. He did not mention anything about being a spokesperson for the task force. He only declared himself as being on the board of the Incorporated Children's Crusade. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how this corporation was set up. What state is the corporation set up in? What is the designation as far as the officers? And more importantly, what is the designation when it comes to the Internal Revenue Service? This is going to be interesting. Now, as it turns out, kind of changing the subject here a little bit, that this task force is also going to attempt to help Phil McConnell out of his financial problem. See, there's a hearing coming up on December 23rd, less than a week from now, to address the final stages of the foreclosure on Phil McConnell's house. And the foreclosure's already been stated. The house is formally in foreclosure. The only thing to wrap up is some administrative details about how the foreclosure is going to take place and when people are going to have to vacate the property. Now, the task force is going to try and barge in and do something to either hold up the foreclosure process or reverse it altogether. And it is my opinion that the task force is nothing more than a metaphor for a lawyer. That there is a bar licensed lawyer licensed in the state of Wisconsin that is going to take this thing over and get it resolved. That there's no task force or government agency or any organization involved. It's a lawyer. And it's also the same with Phil McConnell's criminal situation. Phil McConnell is more than likely retained a really lawyer. Not Kirk Pendergrass or Chris Hallett or some woman from the state of Washington. He has got himself a lawyer that is authorized to practice in the state of Wisconsin, which is something he should have done in the first place. He probably wouldn't be sitting in jail right now if he had got himself a competent attorney who could have negotiated the deal with Kim Picasio to drop this injunction on the assurance that Phil McConnell would keep his big mouth shut, which is all she wanted in the first place. And she basically got her wish, because now Phil McConnell can't talk about her anymore. He can't mention her by name. He can't make any inferences. He can't make any hints. He has to completely ignore the fact that Kim Picasio even exists. Now, that may not let him off the hook. He may still have to go to Florida and appear before a judge. Now, a competent attorney is probably going to tell Phil McConnell to formally apologize to Kim Picasio. He's going to force Phil McConnell to eat his words and say that he just got carried away or something. He'll come up with some lame excuse to explain his threats against Kim Picasio. And if the lawyer is any good, the lawyer would tell Phil McConnell to keep his trap shut about all these conspiracy theories and what's going to happen to the government, and that the judges are all going to be thrown out and Social Security's going away and all this. Because this isn't conspiracy theory fantasy land on the internet. This is a really court of law. And he'd better mind his P's and Q's and better start acting like an adult. There's a remote possibility that if he does so, he might save his sorry ass. But again, Field McConnell is not out of the woods. Tim Holmseth is not out of the woods. Kirk Pendergrass is not out of the woods. And a whole bunch of other people are not out of the woods. Because the damage has been done. They have committed multiple felonies with what they've been doing on the internet. They've committed wire fraud. They violated the statute involving impersonating representatives of the federal government. Now, I would suspect that fairly soon you're not going to hear any more about damage control. You're not going to hear very much about government task force that people are on the board of. I think the Pentagon pedophile part of the task force is history as of today. It died. We now have just a task force. The task force is a super secret task force. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how they explain this task force, because I would suggest that people on both sides of the fence here, the supporters of Field McConnell and those of us who do not, to ask these people just exactly what this really secret task force is. Is the task force in any way, shape, or form affiliated with the government of the United States? No equivocation, no saying, well, clear yes or no. Is the task force affiliated in any way, shape, or form with the government of the United States? Are the representatives of this task force, with Timothy Charles Holmseth as a spokesperson, declaring that they are in contact with and working on behalf of the President of the United States? Is Timothy Charles Holmseth a media spokesperson for the task force? And is this task force getting information directly from the President of the United States or from an authorized representative of the President of the United States? Their answers are going to determine whether or not they are still declaring to be agents or representatives, employees, or otherwise affiliated directly with the United States government. If this is the case, they are still committing the same felony that got them in trouble in the first place. Because changing the name of the organization and making it just a task force doesn't take away the implication. It takes away an open declaration that the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force is an agency of the United States government. They could say, yeah, we have a task force. It's a civilian agency. Would be the logical answer. But if this civilian agency is in any way, shape, or form declaring itself to be representing the word of Donald J. Trump, having some contact with this organization, even if it's through an intermediary, and they imply that Donald J. Trump is aware of this organization, the fraud continues. There's a way they could have made this declaration to begin with to keep away from that particular felony. And I've hinted at it in my statement that I just made. The problem here is it doesn't get them out of the other felony, because they are misleading the public, saying that there is a task force organized, and that part of the mission of that task force is to get Field McConnell out of prison and to get Field McConnell back his house. That's not a task force, that's a lawyer. Now, what this is basically a bunch of people that support Field McConnell. It's not a task force. Task force carries with it the same connotation that the Pentagon pedophile task force carried. Using this lame adjustment in the mission of this organization accomplishes nothing. All it does is attempt to get them out from under the crosshairs of federal investigators. And that's not going to happen because you've already made the declaration. You've already robbed the bank. And you've also damaged yourself because now you're giving people like me and others ammunition to point out that this whole thing was a farce to begin with. That there was no Pentagon pedophile task force. There is no relationship at all with the President of the United States. And you people are a bunch of kids playing pretend. It's a big, complicated game of pretend. And you're not out of the wits because you were kids playing adult games and you got caught. Someone pointed out it's against the law to do what you've been doing. And people started calling the proper agencies. The investigation started. And the investigations are not going to stop because Timothy Charles Homseth wrote an article and declared that there is a task force and that E-Clause is not a legal representative of anyone. Now, Tim Homseth did not say that E-Clause was not representing him. That's the next step. Because right now, it's still implied and has been implied that E-Clause is a representative, legally, of Timothy Charles Homseth. That Kirk Pendergrass has power of attorney in the affairs regarding Timothy Charles Homseth. And so, this does not let Kirk Pendergrass off the hook. Because it is alleged that it is alleged that Kirk Pendergrass is practicing law without a license. Complaints are being made regarding that issue. So Kirk Pendergrass is not off the hook. Not by a long shot. Sometime after the first of the year, he's probably going to find that out. Right now, we're in the holiday season. People are on vacation. People are wrapping up investigations that have been farther along than this new assignment everybody's been handled. But after January 1st, 2020, the clock is going to start ticking again. Vacations will be over. Holidays will be over. It'll be time for people to get back to work. And in order of docket assignments, these things are going to start coming to the surface. And sooner or later, investigators are going to start going to work. And they're going to start going after Kirk Pendergrass, Chris Hallett, and anyone else that has represented themselves as an attorney in any legal case in the United States. E-Clause is incorporated in the state of Florida. So E-Clause is going to have to answer a few questions to the Attorney General of the state of Florida and to the Florida Bar Association. And this is going to be true of any state that E-Clause practices in or has given advice in. And I would suggest if there's anybody that happens to come across this video that has taken the advice of Kirk Pendergrass and have had problems with Kirk Pendergrass, there's two things you can do. Number one, report them to your local bar association. And the bar association where E-Clause is incorporated, which is the state of Florida, and also where Kirk Pendergrass has an office, which is in the state of Idaho. The second is to sue Kirk Pendergrass for attorney malpractice. See, I don't think any of these people who do this sort of thing thought about that. There's lawyers that sue lawyers. It's a specialty. If a lawyer goes to court and doesn't properly represent his or her client and screws up, and it can be proven, that lawyer can be sued for attorney malpractice. It's like a doctor who fucks up an operation. You commit malpractice, you can be sued, and you're in deep doo-doo. Now, lawyers are aware of this, of course, and they carry insurance. They carry liability insurance. They carry malpractice insurance, just like a doctor does. And malpractice lawyers know this, obviously. And so they'll sue against the bond. And depending on how strong the case is, the lawyer might settle. There's a problem here, though. Kirk Pendergrass doesn't have liability insurance that covers attorney malpractice because he's not an attorney. Insurance company's not going to issue him a policy for that sort of thing because he's not a lawyer. And regular liability insurance is not going to cover Kirk Pendergrass because Kirk Pendergrass committed a crime. See, that's an interesting thing about liability insurance. If you commit a criminal act, liability insurance won't cover that criminal act in the event of a civil judgment. You're screwed. Insurance companies aren't stupid. They have little riders in there to make sure that something like this doesn't mess them up. That somebody says, well, I'll just go out and buy liability insurance, commit a crime, and the insurance company will pay for it. Nope, that ain't going to happen. And Kirk Pendergrass doesn't have liability insurance. He's not bonded. It's one of the requirements when you become an attorney. You have to have a way to pay monetary damages in the event that you screw up. Or, if it's not required, it's advisable. Because you're dealing with a highly litigative public. I may not pronounce the word right, but basically the term is that it seems to be people want to go to court about just about anything. I mean, we got a representative of the United States government that's suing a fake cow because his feelings got hurt on the internet by the same lawyer that's suing me, which is kind of funny, but this is what people do. They go to court about anything for any stupid reason they can think of. Tim Homestead did it. He filed so many lawsuits representing himself that the state of Minnesota said, you don't come in here again until you've got a really, really lawyer standing next to you to advise you and be your legal representative. You are not going to represent yourself in court. It's called a vexatious litigant. Means you're an idiot tying up the court. And that pretty well put a damper on what Tim Homestead is doing. So he sidewinded it by coming in and trying to make statements and putting evidence into the records and all this nonsense. The stuff is worthless. But he got it into the court docket, and it kind of sidestepped a little bit some of the restrictions that were put against him. Didn't work, of course. Because look at where he's at. He's got a warrant out for his arrest. And he's basically in a gilded cage. He's sitting in Phil McConnell's house, allegedly, watching his TV, sitting in his lounging couch, eating his food, sleeping in his bed. And by his, I mean Phil McConnell. Timothy Charles Homeseth doesn't own a damn thing. Timothy Charles Homeseth is not paying rent. The only thing Timothy Charles Homeseth is doing is providing entertainment. Timothy Charles Homeseth is Phil McConnell's pet. He's like a little doggy. Little doggy doing tricks. Go fetch. Roll over. Play dead. That's Timothy Homeseth. He's Phil McConnell's little dog. He's his little puppy. And if Timothy Charles Homeseth is a good puppy, he'll get his treat. This whole situation today, December 18th, 2019, is going pretty well the way I thought it would. That at some point, there was going to be a divorce of sorts, a modification, a dwindling of claims, and that's exactly what's happened. Timothy Charles Homeseth has abandoned the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. He's created a really, really secret task force made up of people that are very important, and Timothy Charles Homeseth is at the top of the list again of this task force. Because Timothy Homeseth has to be important. He has to be right there at the top. He can't be a participant or a supporter. He's got to be right in there, in the lead, an important part of all this. Because Tim Homeseth has to be important. Now, the only thing Tim Homeseth has done is ceded that he is not the top gun. He's the wingman. At best, he's the wingman. The rest of the people are the important ones. Phil McConnell is the important one. And I have a feeling that E. Claus and Kurt Pendergast are going to start to fade. And other people are going to start to fade. Sarah Westall or Westfall, however you pronounce your name, she's going to fade. Because the very end of the statement basically threw her out, and others like her that have been supporting Tim Homeseth. The very last sentence says it all. People who appear on radio don't matter, don't represent, are not participating. So that puts Westfall out of the loop. And remarkably enough, since Randy Q. Erickson is a kind of sort of news reporter because of all this conspiracy stuff and Q stuff that she puts on her page, she's not involved either. She's been fired. In this one little declaration that Timothy Charles Homeseth made, he fired everybody. Except Phil McConnell. And maybe Dr. Feelgood and Preacher Dan. But the rest of them have been fired. They've been let go. Now these people are probably going to be stupid enough to support Tim Homeseth until they realize that they basically have been thrown out with the garbage. That in order to protect his pitiful little ass, Timothy Charles Homeseth has disavowed anyone who has a social media account or radio show on the internet. So all you people out there that with the blogs, with the Facebook pages, with YouTube, Zoom, Vimeo, and everything else that have been part of all this, you've just been fired. You've been disavowed. You're not part of any effort to get Phil McConnell out of jail. And you're probably not going to be part of the super duper super secret task force either. It's going to be Timothy Homseth, Phil McConnell, possibly Dr. Feelgood, possibly Preacher Dan, and a couple of people that have been affiliated with Phil McConnell for a long time, but nobody else. Maybe some secret people that won't be mentioned by name, even if, whether they exist or not. But for all intents and purposes, Timothy Charles Homseth, Phil McConnell are closing ranks. And you see, the thing of it is here is the secret as to how Phil McConnell is going to get himself out of prison, or thinks he's going to get himself out of prison, will become known in the coming days. Because if there is an attorney representing Phil McConnell, that name's going to show up on the court records. Because a lawyer will file a piece of paper, a lawyer will make an argument, a lawyer will do something. And that paper will, that name, will appear in the court records. That an attorney registered with the Wisconsin Bar Association is representing Phil McConnell. Not E-Clause, not a task force, but a bar-affiliated attorney. And with that simple entry on that piece of paper, or on the court record, all these people that have made all these outlandish claims ever since October of this year will be proven to be liars. And then all their claims about the U.S. court system not being legitimate will be thrown out, because they have to rely on the U.S. court system as it currently is organized to get Phil McConnell out of this mess. If it can be done. If it's not too late. So buckle up, get your popcorn, get your drinks, and stand by. 2020 is going to be a hell of a year. This is William K. Murtaugh, Burnt Witness 1. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, and have a good one.